Okay guys, this revision video is looking at feedback for the GCSE PE paper 2, and we're going to be looking at the different types of feedback and picking out areas that we're hoping are going to come up in the exam. So first thing we need to remember is that feedback is used to help correct errors in technique and improve performance. So essentially that's your first starting point. If you had a 9-mark exam question, that would be a great starting point. Also, if it was a 9-mark exam question, you may need to think about combining the two of intrinsic and extrinsic and comparing the differences with each of them, with a bit of an advantage and disadvantage on both of them. But we need to focus on intrinsic, extrinsic, concurrent and terminal. They're the types of feedback you need to know. So let's get through it. Okay, so feedback is essentially information gained about a performance. So some information, you do a performance and then you get the information back on it. And again, like I said earlier, it is used to help improve technique and performance. So it can correct errors in technique and that therefore improve performance. So an example would be after a misplaced pass, a player could adjust the skill so that next time they're more accurate. And you could use various examples. You could substitute pass for tackle, shot, interception, anything, and use exactly the same wording. Depends on, I suppose, the exam question that you get faced. It can be used to reinforce the correct action. So if you do something well, coach could praise you, like performing a tackle, and substitute the word tackle for any other example, and the coach praises you, so it reinforces in terms of positive reinforcement. And this can in turn be used to motivate a player to continue doing what they are doing. So feedback is important, and these are sort of generic points here of why feedback is important. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. Extrinsic feedback, probably the most information available is on extrinsic and intrinsic feedback. So information that comes from an external source, that is what extrinsic feedback is. And the external sources can be either your coach or your manager. It could be parents and spectators, and it could be from teammates such as your captain. And that's where you're gathering your information from someone who is not yourself. So an example would be a coach shouting instructions or tactics from the side of the pitch. Now feedback externally is very good because one, it can prevent injuries, because the coach could reinforce the safety rules and tell you, like for example in hockey, to keep your stick down and keep the movement patterns safe, and therefore reducing the risk of injuries because they can see something that's happening from their positioning. It is the best suited for beginners. So if you're getting a question on who should extrinsic feedback be used for, you really want to be focusing on beginners. And the reasoning why is because beginners lack their confidence, and feedback can be used as a way of motivating and encouraging and praising. But also beginners have a little knowledge of how to perform the skills. They don't actually know what they should be doing, and therefore the coach is providing that essential knowledge and skills that they need to know to be able to do the technique and skills. And ultimately what will happen is that the inexperienced performers need instructions to help maximize their performance. They just don't know what they need to do. So the feedback from the coaches or external sources is going to help improve their performance. Now we've got to be careful. A couple of things you could have is too much extrinsic feedback at once will overload and confuse the performers and therefore result in a decline in performance levels. So intrinsic feedback is essentially the reverse of extrinsic, where information is coming from the performer themselves, coming from within the individual. It's sometimes referred to as kinesthesis feel, where we're feeling the movement and we're getting feedback as we're doing the movement from how it feels, rather than constantly looking down at the ball, for example, when you're dribbling. So it's called kinesthesis, where you just feel whether it's right or wrong. You could also get numerical information visually as well, like, oh yeah, you scored because the ball went in the back of the net, and you're getting feedback that way, success or failure. An example would be like if you're losing balance. So a gymnast on the beam, for example, might start to lose their balance, they're assessing themselves and they're self-correcting. And what they do is then they adjust their technique to allow them to stay on the beam. And that could link to multiple sports where something is happening, but balance is quite an easy one to do. A skier, for example, anyone sort of performing movements which are fast and they could lose their balance. So it could be running with a ball, it could be pivoting in a ball team sport, and so on and so forth. But the key thing is you're self-assessing and self-correcting and adapting your technique so you don't fail in the technique. Now, intrinsic feedback is better suited for experienced performers. So like extrinsic was beginners, intrinsic is for the experienced performers. As the beginners don't have the knowledge to sufficiently perform the skill, they haven't learned it well enough, so they don't know how to self-correct. So experienced performers know how to self-correct because they know how to do the skill. They have technique and essential skills, and they know when their performance is going wrong, so they can adjust. So that is the reason why it's better suited for more experienced performers. Now, disadvantages of intrinsic feedback is if you're giving that information for a beginner, it can overload them with the information and therefore confuse them and make more mistakes. Now, concurrent feedback has had less exam time, so there's less information for you to necessarily learn and revise, but it's still equally as important. There is one exam question that is linked to concurrent and terminal feedback about a gymnastics vault and when you should provide feedback. So this is feedback given at the same time as the skill is being performed, so usually during the game or during the performance. It's great for using in training for the coach to provide feedback, but the skill needs to be not too quick so that the performer can then receive the feedback as they're doing it and they can then change as they're going. So it would be the coach shouting instructions from the sideline. It could just be coach trying to motivate the performer, you know, you can do it, those sort of shouts, just to try and keep the confidence up of their performers. And it's used to adjust their techniques and tactics. So it could be a tactical change, like moving people on the pitch, or it could be as someone's dribbling the ball, coach shouting head up or something like that, or player on, and it allows the performer to adjust their technique. And therefore they should be able to win because they could score more, concede less, or win. You know, it's about improving their performance. Key thing is it needs time to process the feedback, so fast skills that can't change mid-performance, it's not very good for. So the example I was talking about earlier is a gymnastics vault, where a coach can't shout in the middle of their vault what they need to do to change because the movement pattern started, it's too quick for any changes to happen. It's best to let it happen and then give feedback afterwards. And that feedback afterwards is called terminal feedback. So terminal feedback is given at the end of the performance. So there's your definition. Skills, where these are best skills where you need time to process that feedback and information. So you would do it after the movements patterns taken place. And you focus on what went well and what you need to improve upon for the next performance. So examples would be something like I said, the gymnastics vaulting, a golf drive, a discus throw, anything that's quite powerful, fast movements where they just don't have the time to adjust mid-performance. They are the examples of where you would use terminal feedback. And the reasoning why is because, like I said, you don't have that time period to adjust as you're going, and you need those. So terminal feedback is where it's best suited to do it in the gaps between performances. So another example where it might be used in a team sport is in football, where the coach has a halftime team talk, or if they finish the game, and what it does is allows the coach to go through a little bit more detailed and in-depth instructions. They might review the tactics and identify what they could be working on either in training or what they need to change for the second half of the game. And that could be substituted for any sort of team sport where there is a break in play, where the coach can have some time to feedback and go into a bit more in-depth instructions with their team. So you've got two methods of terminal feedback. It's either in a team sport where you've got the break in half time, or you have in between movement patterns in training where you can give feedback and adjust the performance before they go at it again. So really quick revision video there on feedback, and do definitely revise it. I think it'll come up, and good luck in the exam.